division in beliefs and ideas and thoughts. And I know, Don, you and I have even had some disagreements, not necessarily disagreements, but different perspectives, or make decisions and then later think, man, maybe we could have made a different decision. And I know that today you texted me and said you weren't coming to church, and I'd like to hear some of your thoughts on why you weren't going to make it to church today.
Yeah, it's a tough decision for all of us to make, and I understand why, as a church, we have to decide on these things, and I'm doing my best to stay out of it, and I'm not criticizing the decision one way or another. It's as a decision is made, when you choose to deal with the ramifications of those, each person does need to have their ability to make up their own mind how they're going to go about this. And unfortunately, the mask issue has become a huge issue that I don't think you and I can solve, nor are we necessarily qualified to solve. And so, in terms of the science and things like that, I'm not an expert on it. And I don't even begin to know or claim to understand this disease or the ramifications of it. But I was not planning on being here, but I felt I needed to be here for you. And ultimately, that's my love for you won out over anything else would have taken place.
Yeah, I look at, many of you that if are watching or at some point are watching, we as a church leadership team got together and really discussed what our options are when it comes down to a mandate. And we tried to look at the idea that maybe, if we take the politics out, if we take some of those types of things, is it when we talk about our core values, are we going to be people, we're going to focus on people over the program and the property? We just felt like maybe that would help us in some ways to say, hey, we are going to love people, and if it's by putting on a mask. And many other churches and other people are using the similar language with the idea that by putting on a mask, we could be, in a way, helping prevent grandma or some other person to get sick. Now, I agree with you, Pastor Don, that I don't believe that the data measures up with that, and I read things, but there's other reports and other people believe other things. But when it came down to it, it seemed to me that the mandate dictated to us what we were supposed to do and comply with. And the fear, in a sense, and maybe I don't know if fear is the right word, but the concern of wanting to have a church that loves God, love others, and loves each other, and raise up a dynamic force and be involved in the community, if we don't comply and there's a sort of people are telling on us or something happens and the police come and they shut us down or something for a certain amount of time, we felt like complying would give us the freedom to continue to worship and the freedom to continue to do our mission. By not complying, those freedoms could potentially be taken away. Now, when we understand separation of church and state, and I know all the arguments, I know all the sides. We just felt like maybe this was the lesser of two decisions that might be the better one to take. Now, Pastor Don, tonight, and as you were watching, we're probably going to have a conversation that kind of shares different perspectives and different sides, and this is pastor's perspectives. Right. And by the end of this conversation, I believe that we're going to walk away friends. We're going to walk away as having grace and things like that. I would hope that those that are watching and continue to watch will have the same perspective, is these decisions that we make or these things that we do might not always be the right decision, and sometimes we're going to need grace for that. Other times it might be the right decision, but other people don't believe it's the right decision, and they need grace for that.
Yes. And it's not always even just a matter of grace. I firmly believe that sometimes the Holy Spirit might be leading one person to act a certain way and another person to act a different way. And everybody on this planet needs a Savior.
Yeah.
And it's not just one group of people. And even as we're talking about sola fide, I don't think it's fair to say, hey, we are only sola fide only for those that
Yeah,
have
do
this
these
point of
things,
view
yeah,
or
exactly.
that point of view. That is contrary to this. And part of the dilemma is whenever we make a mandate, by the very nature, are lopping off a chunk of the population. We are saying to them, yeah, hey, you can come,
Yeah.
but
Sure.
it's
Sure.
only if you meet these requirements.
Yeah, and and I know that even if you don't follow the mandate, there's going to be another lump of people that want you to comply, and they're
Exactly.
not going to come either. So there's in some
Exactly.
ways you're
Yes.
offending someone no matter what you do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but
And that's the hard part, because Jesus said, hey, come all you who are heavy laden, and I will
Yeah.
give you rest. And
Yeah.
rest seems hard for either side at this point.
yeah.
And so how can we?
So how do we fix it?
Exactly.
What can we
How-
do,
how do we
church? What
fix
can
it?
we do, community? What anybody that's watching, text us, put it on the Facebook right now, right in there. Give us the right answer, because if there was any silver lining in the any plan that could actually draw us to the best case scenario to bring unity in the church and the community again, boy, I would love to see that. And I think that you and I have been talking over the last few weeks, and even in the sermon today, I think it had a perspective of. There's a big part of this seems to be the motivation within our own heart, right? Like there is a part of our standing before God, our motivation for what we choose to do and how we do it, and even that can be, and as I said this morning, can be deceitful.
Right.
And sometimes it'd be difficult for me to give advice to somebody else if I have to question whether or not my motives or my heart is right in that. And you've been sharing that with me over the last few weeks as well, going, hey, I'm not sure if I should tell you what I think, because I don't want my motives and my heart to hinder you or your decision or your thought, because maybe you're not in the right place either. And so I know that we've talked about that, and it feels like if we looked within, we could try to work at unity with other people who don't agree with us. I mean, there's something there, but
Yeah, and that's why it was a hard decision for me this morning. I until I heard what you were going through, I wasn't going to come. And it wasn't to manipulate any of this. It was just taking in the information and trying to make the best decision that I felt God was leading me to make.
sure.
And
Well, why don't you go ahead and share some of this, because I do believe that
Yeah.
a lot of us in the leadership team has spent a lot of time discussing sort of the reasons we feel like wearing a mask
Right.
would honor people, would possibly honor at least the opportunity for us to continue to worship if we were to get shut down or something like that. We continue to gather and continue to further our mission. And wearing a mask for some is just a simple, trivial thing that doesn't matter to them, because for them it's just like, well, if I go to Walmart, I go to Target, I go to these different places, I put it on, and then I take it off, when I get out of the car. I mean, so for some, they're kind of going, it's trivial, it doesn't mean much to me, but I'll do it because I really want to come and worship.
Exactly. And we have taught that, hey, whether I eat or whether I don't eat, in regards to a similar type of controversy about eating meat offered to idols, that really doesn't matter. It really boils down to our love for each other, and truly following what it is that God is placing upon our hearts. And we have to give people room to know that, hey, if this is something that their heart is condemning them, we should not be in a place where we're forcing them.
And to be honest, like the biggest issue that I have with the mandate, and the issue that I have with the church making a decision, the leadership team and things making a decision, is the biggest thing that I have is I don't want to make any decision for anybody else.
Right.
I mean, ultimately, that was my biggest fear when I heard mandate. Because right then I sit there and I go, the last thing I want to do is make a decision for anybody else and what they could or should or need to do. There are so many ramifications of somebody coming into a worship service that doesn't have a mask for somebody who wants them to have a mask. There's so many ramifications of whether or not somebody gets sick, and then there's a suit or our insurance doesn't cover us, and we in some ways lose the church building or lose because of not complying to mandate. There's big reasons why the leadership team wanted to try to find the decision to go with the path that seemed to be allowing us to continue the mission without hindering the mission, and to really honor people.
Right.
You know.
And I understand all those things. There are a lot of scary things out there. And, one of the things we've been talking about is making sure that our eyes are on Jesus and not on the wind and the waves. And this is one of the things that I've been coming back to a lot that is, when we get caught up in things like lawsuits or, the political stuff and things like that for me becomes like the wind and the waves. And it can cause any one of us to become very fearful. Even the disease itself is causing fear. If you're not afraid of the disease, then you're afraid of the government usurping too much power. It's a real fear.
Sure.
And one fear isn't more legitimate than the other fear. They're still out there. Now, one of the things when I say whether I eat it or don't eat it, I truly believe that, because there are situations coming up. I'm going to be helping out at the sale that we recently sold, our business. I'm going to be helping them out, and they're going to require me to wear a mask. Mm-hmm. And I have no problem wearing a mask for them. Because it's their business. I'm there to serve them, and this is what they're asking me to do. So I will do that. I've also agreed to help our government take the census here coming up, and I'm going to start training on a week from Monday, and I know I'm going to be required to wear a mask. So the mask isn't so much an issue, nor is the government saying that I am taking the census, I need to represent them and wear the mask. That's not an issue. And there are some people that I come in contact with that I know they prefer me to wear a mask. I had a few people stop by my house today to purchase some of the things that we're selling. And I could tell right away which ones wanted me to wear a mask and which ones didn't. And I had no problem putting it on for them, because it's not so much about me. But here's what I fear as we talk about whether we should, as believers, wear a mask or not wear a mask. Too often, I hear people saying that if you are not wearing a mask, you really don't care about those people around you. That the only justification for not wanting to wear a mask is purely selfish. And that's the part that I cringe a little bit over and feel like, that's not a just statement at all.
Sure.
And part of that, the reason why I say that, happens to deal with the people that God has brought into my life to minister to. And, I know the people that I run in contact with, this type of behavior is more of the majority than not, and that might not be the way the general population is, but I know the people that God seems to be bringing to me have a different feeling about this. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I know for you as well as for me, as this COVID virus has hit us, that what I call my suicide watch list
has gone up. Sure.
is growing.
Yeah. And depression and financial hardship and businesses lost and marriages falling apart. And there's a huge need for ministry to take place.
Exactly.
And for us to, one of the things that when we first went down the CDC requirements before the mandate of masks, we looked at all possibilities to get back into church. And one of the reasons why I felt it was so good was we could honor different people's perspectives, and we could allow people that chose to wear a mask to wear a mask, even because many of those people are saying, I'm doing it not because of fear for myself, but I'm doing it because I love someone else who I don't want to either get sick or whatever. And for me, my perspective was I wanted to be the pastor that could walk to the door and smile and to bring a safe presence that I felt like the pastor needed to be able to bring a smile to the hurting, the lost, the broken, the weary. And it'd been, months before we even got to see each other. And so, I mean, that, and to me, that's still my perspective and my hope, and is to be able to do that. When it came to the mandate, what ends up happening is you followed all the CDC guidelines to a very good way, all those different things, and it feels like, this doesn't become overarching to a certain level if people are willing to, even for one, the exceptions should be the exceptions, right? Like they shouldn't have any. They should have freedom to come. That is an important aspect of our Hope Fellowship, and I do believe that as we, post things and we look at things, some of those things we can clear up, and to make sure that people feel comfortable, in the next week or so, coming to church to not feel, because the last thing I want anyone to feel is that they don't belong or they can't come. Now, what I think the intentions of the leadership team is to say, well, there's a lot of people that aren't coming anyway. They have an option to worship. They have an option to participate in different ways. And if they want to participate in a way of coming into the certain room, they should be, I would say, let them come. I think some people are saying, well, this would be sort of where you get defined in a space at that point in time. And we had already determined that for the 6 weeks or something before, with the idea of if you have kids and you prefer, there's an option here. If you want to wear a mask and you want it required, it's there. And I think this seemed like a little branch to that idea as well. And I know that there's some that have been very offended. And if you're offended and you're watching this, I want to apologize for anything that you may have felt related to that. Obviously, my intention in my heart is not to hinder anyone to come to worship. But I would ask for grace, and I would ask for people to be willing to forgive, and in some ways, their own heart, if your own heart could have the ability to say, this is an opportunity for me to forgive and to, and here's the thing, I don't mind having a conversation and working at understanding both perspectives, but it's helpful to be able to have a solution that works for everybody. And in this case, there may not be one that works for everybody.
You're right.
So.
You're right. And before we get to actually the worship side of things, I do want to flush out a little bit the rationale why there might be some believers that are reluctant to put on the mask. And it boils out of their desire to love some others. Because I feel that too often the only message that we hear is, if you really care about somebody else, you have to put on this mask. And I want for us to be clear that that isn't always the case. We do have a world out there of people that are suffering terribly from the isolation that this virus has brought on to them. And, to just pause a little bit and say, is there a better way to love these people than to insist on the mask? Now, here again, I must confess my own personal bias. I do not believe in them as a good safety measure. But I don't want that to become the thing that we're debating, because I am willing to yield on that one. But I just want to say it's part of one of the things that I'm struggling with in this, but that's not my focus today. My focus really is for us to learn that there is a large segment of our population that is being impacted by this, and I believe in a worse way than if they catch the virus themselves. Because I'll be honest with you, I do know friends who have contracted this virus. As a matter of fact, right now, I have 2 nieces that are positive. Mm-hmm. And they both happen to be in the healthcare profession. They're both nurses. They contracted it serving others, and now they're dealing with it. But here's the thing: of all the people that I know, and I know, we make generalities of these things, but they've all recovered, and most people do. from this disease.
Yeah.
That's
I think out of 5 that I know, 1 has died. So, I mean, 1 out
Yes.
of 5
right.
has
right.
died.
And I'm sorry
yeah.
to hear that.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing.
Yeah.
On the other side of this, though, I am seeing people's health deteriorate from the rules that have been put into place that have basically kept them isolated. I've got 2 in-laws that live very close by, and I'm not permitted to see them at all. And they don't have the virus, but I'm seeing their health just decline. And I know that if they could spend some time with my grandkids, it would sure boost their spirits and be out there. I know in my own family, you know what, my sister and brother-in-law, they've lost their business in the middle of this. My dad was just out here for a visit. He's basically taken a huge hit financially, and told me that, okay, he's going to now have to learn how to live on his Social Security payments,
Really? Wow.
which is, a tough
Different
thing.
change,
So
yeah.
it has completely eliminated from them all their income, and basically it's cost them millions. I'll be
Sure.
blunt
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
And they're fearful, and they're angry, and they don't know what the future holds. And one of the reasons why my dad was in town last week was he just wanted to get away, and he wanted to actually be able to go to a church where masks weren't required.
Sure. Yeah.
Because in his church it's older people, and
They require them.
there you go. So we have that side where
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
have really been affected
Yeah.
hard financially. And I do know, I believe that we've lost people in this church. And when I say lost, that they've literally died
Sure.
as a result of
Yeah.
those type of financial complications.
Yeah, we had talked about multiple people just maybe a couple months back, but during this pastor's perspective of people that we know that have lost their job and then lost a lot of self-esteem, and they go to the bottle or they go to a certain thing that creates different
Yes.
tensions and struggles. And I have the thing that I would love to communicate and say is that what I find typical is when people come to me who are angry and who are frustrated with these types of things, I agree. I agree with you.
Right.
I do. I don't disagree much with people who have been frustrated. I agree with you. I don't want to have masks in church.
Right.
I agree with you. And yet, there's a part of me that also is trying to determine and listen to, the different instructions of what people are saying and determining. And I have been spun around by so many different lies and truths all the time. And I imagine you're probably all sick of it as well, because that's exactly what continues to happen.
Exactly.
And as I shared today and I poured out my heart, and if you watch it, I probably never watch that sermon again.
That was good. That was a great sermon.
I probably don't know if
One
I'll
of
ever
your-
watch it again.
One of your best ones, I believe, ever.
Yeah.
So it needs to be watched.
But the reason I say that is because,
It's painful.
it's hard. I literally felt collapsed when I got home.
Yeah.
Emotionally, I am drained. I am frustrated. I'm hurt. And I'm trying to be strong, and I have a hard time knowing how to lead a church and a community that is divided and divisive. And I want to fight the real enemy and not each other.
Yeah.
And that's really what I hope people get from the message today, is that the real enemy is the devil, the father of lies, and we do need to figure out and find truth, and to be able to put our faith in Christ alone, and to believe that, if I would have looked back over all these years in ministry after 21 years, I wouldn't believe this would ever happen. And when I look at those 21 years and I think about ministry here at this church and beyond the ministry and things that I've been able to do, I've come to the point where I believe that God's called me to minister to the hearts and minds of people, to encourage, to build up, to restore, to all the things that a pastor and a shepherd do. But the thing that I don't believe and want to believe is that God's put me in a position of dictating and determining people's decisions or outcomes with mask or not mask, or vaccinations or not vaccinations, or this or that or the other thing. Sometimes pastor has a big enough role in so many ways, and then there's kind of gets dumped on you to say, now what do you believe about this? And so when I'm preaching a sermon like I preached this morning, and I'm looking around and I'm passionate and things like that, I sometimes wonder, boy, did I just say something that I'm going to regret? Because somebody may completely disagree with my passion and my enthusiasm on a certain point and perspective. But that's why I want to say to you, I probably agree with you in a lot of ways. And to be honest, I do not think masks work, and I don't think that they're whatever. But at the same time, it's a struggle. Here's the other side of, you get ridiculed in a sense for not wearing a mask, or people telling you that. Do you know the first thing that happened to me today when I had a mask on and I walked in?
Probably get criticized.
I got criticized, I got ridiculed, and I just fell into my office with my head down and I just cried.
Right.
And I looked around and I saw no one else putting a mask on in any way, and I thought, you know what, I don't want them to have to. And yet, I feel like this was a sort of what we were required to do. It just feels like everybody knows when you go to Walmart, you better put a mask on. Everybody goes to Menards, you better put a mask on.
Right.
And it just wasn't that easy even now.
Yeah, and it's tough because we're all dealing with the ramifications of this. Yesterday, my grandson had his 4th birthday, and here's what his 4th birthday consisted of. It was his grandparents on both sides, and an aunt, and one cousin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just kind of going, man, what a shame.
Yeah, because
For a
nobody would show
4-year-old.
up.
Yeah,
Because of-
we couldn't do anything.
Couldn't do anything.
Couldn't go anywhere. You had the same thing with your own kids.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
You know, just lamenting that. Anyways, as this was finishing up, my grandson's other grandfather was there, and before he left, he was going to give me, one of the elbows,
Yeah.
and I said, "I'll shake your hand."
Yeah.
And he reached out and he goes, "You have no idea
How much that means?
how good that feels." Now, I'm not saying that it's right for me to shake someone's hand in today's culture. All I know is by me doing that, I brought life, just a little sliver of it, to this man that I only get to see occasionally on events like this. And so what I want to say is, we can't judge people and what's going on in their hearts by whether
Sure.
they have a mask on or not. And that's been one of the things that I've been grieving over as I'm watching this, is that we are so quick to jump to those type of conclusions. And people were wrong to criticize you this morning when they saw you with the mask, and people are wrong to criticize you for not believing in
I tell you
masks.
what, there's plenty of times where I've walked into stores without them. I mean, I don't walk in a store with a mask on,
Right.
unless I've been asked to, and then I do. And so, I mean, they're both sides. Similar to what you just said earlier, and I'm willing to do that. One day, we had a meeting, and at the meeting, the meeting that I had, there was a couple people that were wearing masks, and there was about 6 or 7 that weren't. And when I walked into that meeting, I felt like if I don't wear a mask, I offend 2 or 3.
Yes.
If I wear a mask, I've offended 5 or 6.
Right.
And so what I did was I walked in and I looked at the people with the masks, and you know what I asked? I said, "Would you like me to put this mask on in front of the other 6 people?"
Right.
Why?
Right.
Because I wanted them to know, the 6 people to know, that I was offering it for the people that possibly were wearing it and wanted me to wear it. And the two or 3 that were wearing masks said to me, "No, you don't need to wear one.
Right.
But thank you for asking."
Right.
And so, it's difficult, but I felt like in that approach, it was helpful to be able to communicate. And I don't know, in a church with a mandate and things, I don't think that that's as easy for in a scenario anymore. And that's what really burns me and hurts me, to think that we feel somewhat trapped. And I know many of you that maybe disagree with me in that would say, well, you don't have it. You have separation of church and state. You have government mandates don't carry water, things like that. And I got to tell you, we're going to continue to look into it. I don't know if this one day of doing this to honor a mandate doesn't mean that every day every Sunday for the next 10 years is something that we have to do, or 5 months or whatever it is. But we're going to continue to be keeping our eyes open, our ears open to understanding and seeing what we can do as a church. And I just hope that people have the ability to be patient, ability to have a heart to recognize these are difficult issues, ability to have grace in the midst of some of these things.
Yeah. And so, if I'm willing for some people to wear a mask, for other people not to wear a mask, then why on earth wouldn't I be willing to come to church if church is asking me, if Hope Fellowship is asking me, telling me that they want me to wear a mask? Well, that was the question that I was wrestling with.
And Hope Fellowship wasn't wanting to ask anybody. It was a mandate that the governor asked.
Right.
And so it was really, when it comes down to it, Hope Fellowship did not ask anyone to wear a mask. It was the governor asking you to wear a mask. And we felt our only choice was to honor that. Hope Fellowship does not want you to wear a mask if it's your choice not to. Like, we want you to have the choice. But when the government and the mandate and the CDC and the recommendations and all those laws and rules, I got to tell you, I'm sorry, but I am a compliant person over all these years. Ever tell you the story about the time when I would say something bad to my mom and dad or whatever, and they'd say, run up to your room. And you know what? Before I could go to bed, you know what I would do? I'd go down and make sure I fix that relationship. I actually remember a time, Pastor Donnie, maybe you remember this, when Phil and I were getting a little bit agitated at a meeting, and we got you agitated at a meeting, and I think you were pretty frustrated with us. And
it was probably more than one meeting.
maybe, but I remember Don, you kind of left a little bit irritated, and Phil and I looked at each other like, what did we just do? Do you remember who showed up?
Yeah, you probably beat me to my office.
I beat you to your office because I wanted to make sure that our relationship was okay.
Right.
I want to make sure I didn't, and my intent was not to hurt you in any way, but it was probably to impress Phil,
Yeah. Well, part of what transpired there is in Brian's video, he said, if you can't show up here without a mask.
Yeah, sure.
Then
and these were the written rules of the mandate.
Exactly.
I mean, that's what it was.
So at that point, I had three choices. I can either follow that, or I could show up and say, well, I'm not going to wear a mask and have you guys remove me.
Yeah, which wasn't going to happen. There was never going to be that
exactly.
way. Yep.
Or, I did not want to cause a scene. Or I could show up and comply and, sit here and worship with a mask and be angry the whole time. Yeah. And it wasn't so much that. I didn't feel like I was going to be angry here, but I began to wrestle with the idea of what worship is for me. And, for me, a big piece of worship is building that intimacy with God. And I did not feel in good conscience that I could worship. It has nothing to do with serving the people in the church. It was strictly the worship side of things. That for me to put on something that, first of all, like we talked about, I do not believe in this thing. I believe that we've been lied to about this thing. So if that's part of what I'm believing, how can I stand in front of God with what I believe to be a lie covering my face, trying to build intimacy with Him? I saw a huge contradiction going on. And with good conscience, I was going, it's no longer worship for me personally. Others might be able to do that, but I was struggling with the very act of worship. in this.
Yeah, and even the one thought, and I don't mean to cut you off, but the one thought that we had, and I don't know if it was the best idea or not, but we had given options to everything, and at one point, I was thinking in our church, like, it really would be nice if we hadn't met in the building for the last 6 weeks or something, and maybe we did outdoor service, because in some ways, if you did an outdoor service, it gives you the freedom to not have a mask on. Like, that was sort of, right, it was only if you came indoor with the air conditioning and all the different things, even though we prop doors and we do these things or whatever. But, so then the quick thought was, well, if we provided something that if people wanted to come and not wear a mask, they could still come. And I see how that can be offensive to people. Say, well, I'll just stand outside. And that's not our intention at all. It really is to say, boy, if there's a group of 20 people that still want to gather, but they won't wear a mask or choose not to wear a mask, and they want to honor other people who are choosing to wear a mask, then they could still have an option that would give them that. Now, here again, it probably isn't the best idea, or it could be taken offensively, and I apologize if it's taken offensively, because that's not at all the intention.
And I didn't think that anybody was trying to offend me. I was just kind of going, well, with the parameters that are given, what are we really accomplishing? And my conclusion at that point is, well, it's not going to be worship. Mm-hmm. When Jesus said, hey, there's coming a time when you can worship in spirit and in truth, I was going, I'm not being truthful at this point. And so it no longer, it became a charade. I would come in here to put on this type of thing, when really what I wanted and needed is to just spend time in God's presence. And I didn't want for there to be any type of barrier for me at that point. And so it's like, I can't truly worship Him with that mask on.
Yeah, it is really difficult, because even when you look at all the other options before the mandate came out, and we were choosing those things too, we gave people the option of going, not being in this building if you wanted mask, or not being in that building when you wanted not wearing mask. And so, and all of that has been wanting to just allow people who have differing views to allow them to have their views. And what's really hard is when the government says, no, you're gonna be on this side now. You have to have this view. And that became where the problem really hit. Because then it's only the people that want everyone to have masks on are going to be happy, in a sense, and everybody else is going to be upset. Mm-hmm. And when a government says that, now here again, people say, well, you can fight the government. I understand that. We can make different decisions potentially in the future, but in the process of what we were doing, we believed that it was important for us to try to comply to what the wishes were, because we're looking at this as an opportunity in a way to care about our community and to not hinder the effect. Now, when it comes to worship, and you talk about the mask and how you cannot have intimacy, I mean, I can imagine it being, you're not going to wear a mask with your wife. Exactly. And I mean, I stole that from you. You shared that earlier. But the thought is I do understand that too, and yet it's dark in this room, and I would imagine that some people would say it's a spiritual thing. It's not. There's others that would say they don't have that issue, and it goes to food sacrifice to idols, and it actually says in the Bible, in Romans, it says, if somebody believes a certain way in their heart, you don't do the opposite, because that will condemn you, but do the thing that you believe in your heart. I would imagine that as we learn and grow in these types of things that have been pushed on us, within how many days did we have to decide?
Thursday is when he came
I know. Yeah. And we're sitting here just trying to go, what are we going to do? And we made the best decision we felt at the time. My guess is that very soon, very quickly, within this next week, we will have discussions that will open up potential opportunities in ways that would have the freedom to worship together. And I actually had read something today about the sheriff's office and about other local police stations and the governor himself has said basically that this is not something they want to enforce. Right. They want to give a mask, but they don't want to enforce. And in some ways, I think they're looking for a 90% compliance
Right.
thing where if 1 or 2 or 5 don't comply, they're not going to necessarily create a big havoc with that. Now, I don't know where we're going to choose or what we're going to do. I take it or leave it. I am a submissive type person in nature, and I lead by listening and believing. And some of you appreciate that aspect of me. It can be a very strong strength when it comes to relationships. It can also become a weakness when it comes to leadership. And that's part
Well,
of...
and here's the thing, Josh. I'm not questioning the decision that the leadership team made on behalf of me and the rest of us. I'm proud that you guys made it. I'm proud that you were able to pull off what you did. I'm just telling you how I responded to
Sure.
the decision. And as you guys make the decision, okay, now it's incumbent upon me to
Abide.
figure out
I know.
what
Yep.
I'm going to do. Now, here's the good news in all of this. I was here.
Yep.
Okay, so why would a guy who, first of all, is not wanting to wear a mask and is believing that I'm not going to truly be able to worship
Yeah.
if I have that mask on? Well, there's more than one way to worship God.
Yeah.
And Romans 12:2 talks about
Not conforming.
This is your spiritual act of worship. Well, what
Living,
is that?
living sacrifice. Offering your body as a living sacrifice.
Offering. So
Yeah.
here I was.
Romans 12:1,
And the one reason why I was here was for you. It was, as I was evaluating, okay, do I come or do I not? I thought I had made up my mind. I'd gotten all my chips on one side. It was obvious to me that, it's probably best for me not to be there. And then I started texting with you this morning, an hour before the service. I was still in bed, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
And when you told me that you were crying,
Agonizing
sorry,
as a man.
Did
You say
let
crying?
out?
Agonizing.
I was going, that's it, I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm there.
I'm going to cry every week for everybody.
Yeah.
Please come.
None of these other
Agonize
things
every week.
matter,
Please come.
But I wasn't going to leave you hanging, and I
Yeah.
never will.
Yeah.
I'll always have your back.
Yeah.
Even when things like this happen, and I wasn't trying. If I had stayed away, it wasn't to make a protest movement.
Yeah.
It was just going, hey, if I'm not going to be able to worship there, why don't I
Yeah.
take the option that you've given? But ultimately, no, that was not my spiritual act
So-
of worship this morning.
When you were here this morning, how did you feel leaving after all of what you
I got to
experienced?
tell you, honestly, I had the time of my life this morning here. I was so proud of you.
Thank you.
When you got up there, because I had just about 10 minutes with you before the service, and I listened to your heart, and I said, Josh, you need to tell the people what you just told me. And you did. And it was beautiful. We really got to see what's going on in your mind and what you're wrestling with, and it's pure gold. If anybody's criticizing you, and let me tell you something, they don't know gold when they see it. And so as a result, I was just kind of going, yes. And I saw Raleigh step up to lead.
Yeah.
I know Eric wasn't feeling well, and you know what? He made sacrifices
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
for you guys to get out
Yeah.
and do this. I saw John Blaylock got the tough duty of standing outside
Yeah.
with anybody who
Yeah.
wasn't able to come in here.
Yeah.
These are the things I saw,
Yeah.
and so I went away from here glorifying God, going,
Yeah.
geez, what a beautiful church.
Yeah.
And I would have missed all that.
Yeah. It was interesting because there were people who were angry before.
Yeah.
And they looked at me in the eye and they were upset. And some of their family, some of their spouses or children weren't coming. And at the end of the service, when I walked out, those were the people that broke the rules.
Yeah.
They were giving me a hug.
Yeah, there you go.
They were giving me a hug and they were looking at me in the eye. And I don't know how many text messages and phone calls and Facebook posts that I received today, but people were saying, we are on the side of the heart of Hope Fellowship and the ministry of God. And if you're asking, we'll do what you ask, even though if we don't want it to be that way. And honestly, and I told you this before the service, I specifically said to you I said to you, I don't think I can lead Hope Fellowship. I just want to minister to people. And I said, because I have no desire whatsoever to tell somebody what they have to do.
Yep.
And you told me something else.
What did I tell you?
You told me that's the reason why
Yeah.
I should be pastor.
Yeah.
And when I couldn't speak 5 minutes before the service, and I was walking around in the back in tears in my eyes, people trying to smile and look at me, and they had no idea because I had a mask on what I was feeling. There was a moment when I just said, hey, you know what? God gave you that place in that moment to stand up there and say what needs to be said. And I think I told you that too. Maybe you need to just say what needs to be said. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
If you look into Romans chapter 12, when it says, therefore, I urge you in view of God's mercy, of everything he's already done for us, offer your bodies as living sacrifices, for this is your spiritual act of worship. Maybe that's a message that we can take today where, hey, I'm willing to sacrifice and be a living sacrifice for someone else. And the Bible, even after that, it says, don't conform to the pattern of the world. You know, and I would imagine some people would love to say, that's what I'm saying when you, with a mask or not a mask. And what I'm saying is I think in the context of that, it's about living in community, in relationship, in love. I mean, it talks about love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted when brotherly love, honor each other above yourself, never be lacking in spiritual fervor, keep serving the Lord, like conquer evil by doing good. One of the things we've said over the years constantly is I don't need to be right, but I need to do the right thing.
Exactly.
And I don't know what the right thing is sometimes.
What you
but
did this morning was right,
yeah,
you know.
so.
So, well done. You know what? One of the things that Brian Swanson said is that we need to be patient with one another through this. The decisions that are made may not go our way. They might not be the decisions that we would make. But, geez, I firmly believe that God has placed in this church good, qualified people who love the Lord. And we've been given the best pastor that I can imagine having. And so let's learn to relax. Let's learn to be patient with one another. If you choose not to come, I understand that. I wasn't going to come. Mm-hmm. But you know what? I did come, and I'm so glad that I did. And that just gives me even more faith that we're going to do some amazing things here.
Yeah.
So let me encourage you out there. Come. Just come.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
We'll work it out.
We'll figure out ways for you to worship so that
in
mask isn't in the way.
in spirit and in truth.
Right.
With the mask not being in the way.
Right.
And Don, you've affirmed me in a lot of ways today. You were there for me, and I thank you for that. And you know how important you are to me.
I love you, man.
And I will say this, by you not coming this morning, I don't think God would have used me in the same way, because God has a way of I feel like Elisha, is that the right one?
He's the second one. So.
The second one, yeah, who came after. And anyway, you guys, we need each other. And if you're having a hard time, you can reach out to me. Brian Swanson, talk to Don, talk to some of our leadership team people. We are all in this together. And in Romans, when it gets after Romans 2, it talks about that we should be determined. We should look at our ability of our faith. That we should measure our how good we are by the faith that we have. But we need to be unified as one body. And it continues to go throughout that. And I challenge you to read those scriptures and things like that. Thanks for joining us. I hope that this will be an episode and things that people really watch and listen to. I hope people glean some things. I hope people will leave here knowing that we're going to continue to work at loving each other, loving God, loving others, loving each other, and really extending grace to people. We need it from everybody. And if you're one that's having a hard time giving it, well, maybe it'll be a hard time for some people to give it to you when you need it. So be careful. All right? We love you. Thanks for watching. See ya.